So when we're talking about quantum biology, we also have to bring up the liquid crystal ability of our biological tissues and cells, as well as the water that lines them, right? So our cell membranes, our vessels, all of these things are aligned in a way that's just like a liquid crystal. And as soon as I say liquid crystal, I know people's eyes sort of, oh, there she goes. She's talking about crystals. And I just want to put it into context. So every screen that we look at, our TV screens, our computer screens, they're all run on liquid crystal technology. And that's a fancy name for being in between a state. It's a mesophase between a solid and a liquid. And these liquid crystals are aligned and ordered, just like a crystal. So when we're talking about quartz and the ability to compress a crystal to create an electrical spark, we see the same thing with our liquid crystal cell membranes, our fascia, our collagen, and our connective tissue that connects everything throughout the body. There's this liquid crystal ability to generate electrical currents and information, right? So when we are moving, when we are using movement and pressure, twisting to create that piezoelectric, that viscoelastic current of electricity, that is our liquid crystal membrane doing that. And these membranes are hydrophilic. They love water. And a certain special kind of water lines those tissues and those membranes, and it's called structured water or easy water. It has been around for a long time, and it hasn't been readily accepted until recently. Gerald Pollack and his team out of the University of Washington has done amazing research bringing that fourth phase of water or structured water into the forefront. And now it's something that you can find in so many journals. People change the names, unfortunately, but it's all over, and it's associated with all kinds of health benefits, and the lack of it is associated with so many different diseases and ill health. And so what we see is that that liquid crystal membrane, or maybe it's a blood vessel or a lymphatic vessel, or like we talked about the tissue, our connective tissue and fascia, all of these things have that ability to create that structured water along their lining. So we see the structured water being built at the surface. And what do I mean by structured water? I mean that we're so used to talking about water as H2O, right? And we think of it, I always thought of it as like Mickey Mouse, right? We have our oxygen with the little hydrogen ears, and all these little Mickey Mouse faces are flowing around, and that's water. But that's really not what's happening. Those hydrogen ears are constantly dancing. They're being cleaved and removed and taken up by different oxygen molecules. And one of the formations that happens, water is very dynamic, H2O is very dynamic. And one of the things that happens with that dance in the hydrogens is that they become structured with the input of infrared energy and light. They become structured. Those hydrogens become tightly bound in a lattice formation. It looks like a honeycomb, right? Those bees know everything. It looks like a honeycomb shape. And this structured water has the ability to trap information, energetic information, electronic information, information from protons, photons of light, phonons of sound, and that information can be used to drive biological processes. Now, Pollack and his team did a couple great, they've done a bunch of amazing research, but something that really highlights the power of structured water is a classic experiment that they did where they put an electrode in the structured water lining that hydrophilic surface, and they put another electrode in the bulk water that forms outside of the structured water, and it created a battery. And that battery is a biological battery that powers all of our processes. It gets our cilia to move, it gets our enzymes to react. It is literally powering our biology. And so when we're talking about the elements and how inseparable we are from the world around us, it is that mechanism, that is one of the main mechanisms, not the only one, right? But one of the main mechanisms in which we are interacting and inseparable from the ecosystem we live in. And bringing up the elements is such a beautiful way to walk through that. And starting with sunlight, we can see that that experiment that we just talked about, creating that water battery in our biology, that is powered by infrared energy and heat and light. And the biggest source of infrared energy in our system is the sun, of course. And that's exactly what Pollack and his team found, is that the sun and that infrared energy structures that water, allowing our body to create more energy, to create a very efficient flow of energy throughout our mitochondria, throughout our fascia. When we start to really dive into the anatomy of whatever we're talking about, the brain, the heart, the mitochondria, we start to see that that relationship between that liquid crystal structured water and that liquid crystal cell membrane or connective tissue, they are interacting with that photon of light. And that photon of light has such a powerful ability to reverberate that information throughout that liquid crystal network over long distances. And that's another characteristic of liquid crystals that make them really efficient and optimal for quantum mechanics, is that ordered alignment of hydrogen atoms allows for a long distant chain of communication that can happen at the speed of light or faster. And so that is what we're talking about when we're talking about that relationship we have with the sun, that it isn't only driven by the light that we get through our eyes. It's driven by the opsin protein that we have in our skin, in our nervous system, right? That vagus nerve that we talk about so often with stress and trauma and the ability to build resilience and be in a state of safety and a sense of calm. That vagus nerve is dependent on the photonic information it receives from the sun. It is the main driver that sends out that information. And what does that mean in normal speak? That means that a photon of light hits our proteins in our retina. That oscillation, that vibration is transferred to the vagus nerve and spread throughout our biology so that every single cell is tuned to that rhythm of the light in our environment. We have a central clock in our biology, our SCN, and that is what is directly attuned to that retinal uptake of photonic information from the sun, that light we get, hopefully natural light from the sun. And that information is relayed to all those peripheral clocks. All of our cells, almost all of our cells in our body have these circadian clocks. And when they are aligned with the rhythm of the sun, they work more efficiently, they function much better than if they have that chrono disruption or that misalignment with the sun, where we are staying up past the sun going down, getting that artificial light. We see that that really cascades throughout the biology. You know, non-native light affects our mitochondria and the ability to create energy, the proteins that actually you see in the electron transport chain within the mitochondria, those are spaced further apart when we are exposed to predominantly blue light. And the beautiful thing about the sun and the rhythm of the sun is that when we get that morning and evening sun, it is packed with red light that protects us from that, that makes sure that our mitochondria is primed and working very efficiently and can handle the effects of the higher blue light of daylight sun. That's what I'm trying to say, of daylight sun. So you see this really sophisticated communication network that is happening at all times, and it's guided by the sun. It's aligned and guided by the sun. That information is informing, educating, and guiding our DNA on a fundamental level. It's really amazing. And we can talk about, you talked about all those things that happen when we align with the sun, when we're getting that AM sunlight before 10 a.m. And we're talking not a huge thing. We're not talking about hiking mountains in the morning. We're talking about sipping your cup of tea in natural light. Same thing when the sun goes down, getting that exposure to a sunset and then lowering the lights at home to something like a salt lamp that I have behind me, or even a red light, shutting off those fluorescent lights. It's getting in sync with that rhythm, and it ripples throughout our biology in so many different ways. It's absolutely amazing, that relationship we have with our sun.